Hey everyone, Lawrence Mack here, founder of Real Estate Rookies, and I am pleased to have an amazing guest, Ryan Smith from Launcher Farm. Hey Ryan,
How are you?
I'm doing amazing. How are you doing this morning?
I'm here and I'm alive, so I'm good.
Awesome. Well, today we're going to go through 7 myths about geographic farming. Ryan Smith is from Launcher Farm, and he helps agents start their farm. So Ryan, take it away.
All right. So I'm going to get right into the presentation then.
Sure, why not? And if you have any questions, I'll be monitoring the chat in Zoom and on live Facebook. So I guess message and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, sounds good. I'm just going to present. Give me 1 second and then we'll get started. All right. So you can see it okay then on your end?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay,
Farming
perfect.
fallacies, 7 most common farming myths.
All right. So you did the intro for me. So perfect. All right. So yeah, we're going to be talking about the 7 most common farming myths. I'm going to jump into why they started, where they come from, what that means for you, and how you can get started farming in yourself as well. So I want to start with who I am, and then we'll get into it. So I'm Ryan Smith. As Lawrence mentioned, I'm the creator of the Launcher Farm show. I have a program. I've got some training programs as well. I'm obviously a fan of geographic farming. I've been a speaker, trainer, and coach. I've coming up to now 13 years in the business, and you may also recognize me. I used to have a show called The Niche Agent as well. But I love the business. I love everything to do with farming, and I love basically helping agents as well. So I'm going to start with what is farming. A lot of people may not know what farming is. They may have heard about it. They may have some misconceptions, which we're going to obviously clear up today, hopefully. And but I want to start with explaining what it is. And for people who may not have experienced it, comes from the analogy of actual farming. So planting your crops, you go out and you tend to your farm, you watch it grow, and you reap your harvest. So farming can be used for really anything that's a focused market. Now, in my case, I like to specialize in geographic farming, but farming could be your database, it could be demographic, a sociographic, it could be price points, it could be all different things, or geographic farming. So for me, I focus on geographic farming. That's what I'm passionate about, what I like. So my definition is strategically focusing your expertise, marketing, and prospecting efforts in one specific geographic area to build a sustainable business and long-term relationships. So it's a long-winded, big jargon talk for saying become the expert in one geographic area. So that could be condo building, it could be a part of town, it could be a neighborhood, it could be a subsection of a neighborhood. It's really just becoming the go-to person in a geographic area. And there's a number of strategies you can do to do that, to really become that go-to person. But today I want to dive into the myths around that, and hopefully we can debunk some of those myths and get people really realizing why farming is great and if it's a good fit for them as well. So I want to talk about some of the benefits of farming as well, so you can understand why you should be doing farming. So the first is, in my opinion, farming is much more efficient than traditional methods of doing business for a number of reasons. The first is it allows you to really become the go-to person. It allows you to layer in your strategies, which I call strategy stacking. So you can put in a bunch of different strategies into one place so that you can get more business out of it. You don't have to drive 3 hours out of your area to go service clients. You can become the go-to person. So it really helps you become a lot more efficient with your business. The other big part of it is it positions you as the local expert. And when you become that local expert, it becomes way easier to get business. It handles a lot of the objections. People start coming to you. You start getting those just list me calls because people are excited to work with you because they know what you're about. They know that you're consistent with your business. They know what you do. So it makes your job a lot easier, and it allows you to become that local expert. Also, because of that, you are now able to convert more leads. You start winning more appointments. You start getting more appointments. You start, like I said, handling those objections so much easier because people have already seen what you do. They know what you're about. You've got a proven track record, and people trust what you do. The big part of it as well is it allows you to create a sustainable long-term business model. And if you do farming correctly, and if you grow and adapt as you do it correctly, you can literally build a long-term business model where you can feed your entire real estate business from your little pocket. And year after year after year, just keep getting business coming in and coming in and coming in. And it allows you to really scale up or scale down or just keep plugging away and doing things that work. And if you do this correctly, you can literally feed your business pipeline for the rest of your career if you do it correctly. The other reason why I like farming as well is it allows you to use a variety of lead sources. And I mentioned earlier, strategy stacking. It creates a safety net, and I call this the safety net model. So by adding in those different strategies, you now can protect yourself. And a perfect example of this is COVID. So if you were out and your business model was door knocking and open houses, your entire business model may have been obliterated because you can't go out and door knock and you can't do open houses. So if you have one pillar of how you do your business, that can change. A while ago, people used to do cold calling a lot, and then the do not call list came out, and that really took a chunk out of people's business. Or people were doing expireds, and in Canada, they stopped allowing us to do expireds. So if you've got one pillar of business, it can tend to dry up, or things can change, or things don't work as much. So when you add in these variety of lead sources or ways of generating business, it creates a safety model. And it goes back to that being more efficient. It allows you to reach more people. It allows you to get more business out of it and get a much more solid business. And lastly, the big reason why I like farming is it's a community-based approach. And coming out of COVID, as we go forward in the future, there's more and more emphasis on the community. There's more emphasis on shopping local and supporting local businesses. And people want to know that they're helping out their neighbors, and they want to know what's happening in the community. And it is so important. So when you do farming correctly, you can really help bring in the community. You can help pull the community together. You can be the ambassador for the community, and it allows you to really become a solid member of the community that you're farming. So there's a number of other reasons why farming are great, but these are just some of the reasons that why I like farming. And if you've done farming, hopefully you've got to see the benefits of these before. If you haven't, hopefully if you start farming, you'll be able to start reaping some of these benefits as well. So I firmly believe that farming is the future. A lot of people are worried what's going to happen with real estate in the future, and they're worried about big tech and big teams and things like that. If you do farming correctly, you can become the go-to person. You can build those local relationships. You can connect with a community that will never be replaced by big tech, that will never be replaced by big giant real estate teams. If you do it correctly, you can literally become that ambassador. You can build the relationships with people. And if you use new strategies that you can implement into your business, you can almost insulate your business from competition and build a solid business. So if you're interested and you want to get into farming, I firmly believe the right strategy for farming is the future of real estate if you do it and if you stick with it. Oops. So we're going to jump into the 7 myths. So in my experience, farming has changed over the years. So some of you may have heard about farming. You may have gotten the business 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or even if last year. A lot of people talk about farming as it's postcards and door knocking. And the reality is it's evolved and it's changed. And since things have changed, because of that, we've left with outdated thinking with a lot and are left with a lot of these real estate myths. So I'm going to bust some of those myths. I'm going to go through those. And then at the end, we're going to answer some questions, and hopefully it'll open your eyes to why farming is great and why you should be looking at it as part of your business. So I'm going to jump right into it. But I want to, before I do that, I want to talk about why these myths show up, because it's important to understand where the myths come from and where these misunderstandings come from. The first reason that I see, and the most common reason for myths showing up with really anything, not just farming, but this real estate business that we love so much, is fear. A lot of agents are afraid. They're afraid to do a strategy. They're afraid that things aren't going to work. They're afraid they're going to look silly. They're afraid it's not going to work in their area. So fear drives a lot of these myths, and it drives a lot of misinformation because people don't understand. They don't really dive into it and don't learn about it, which leads to the next one, which is the misinformation. That misinformation can really alter and shape your business. If you got in the business and you maybe started at a brokerage and maybe the boss tried farming and they told you, farming sucks, it's not a good thing to do, I wouldn't try it. You may have been misdirected. You may have been misinformed about it. And you think, well, if my boss said that, then farming obviously doesn't work, or cold calling doesn't work, or door knocking doesn't work, or open houses don't work. And there's a lot of agents who have been misguided with misinformation on what really can work if done correctly. The next one is there's a lack of training. And that's part of why I stepped up to create my whole Launch Your Farm program. There's a lack of training around farming. Again, the training that is there leads to out-of-date practices, which we'll get to in a second. But the lack of training around it tends to not get people excited about it. There's a ton of training on scripts. There's a ton of training on cold calling. There's a ton of training around door knocking and open houses. But when it comes to farming, it's kind of that strategy that's tucked away and people have heard about, but they don't really know much about. So then because they don't have the training, they are misinformed, and then they're afraid to go out and start doing it. And then also the lack of experience. So people haven't done it before, or if agents have tried it, they some agents have tried it, said, oh, it didn't work, and then they think it doesn't work. They pass on that misinformation, and it creates this vicious cycle. And lastly, the out-of-date practices. In the past, real estate has been, or farming has been postcards and door knocking. That's what people preach and talk about. And that's what a lot of people's misconceptions are about farming. Again, I've interviewed hundreds of agents and talked to tons of agents. And when I talk to them, they say, well, I don't want to do postcards, or I don't want to do door knocking. And the reality is those are one strategy. It's not the only strategy. And those out-of-date farming practices are not the only way to grow your farm. And if you do it correctly, there's a ton of different strategies you can use. So I'm going to jump right in and go through those myths, and hopefully we'll bust them. So myth number one is farming takes way too long to get results, and I want instant business. Again, if you've been around long enough, or if you've been in the industry at all, or looked into farming, you've probably heard the saying that it takes 6 to 18 months to see results in your farm. And the reality is that nothing is instant real estate, no matter if you're doing internet leads, no matter if you're doing cold calling, no matter if you're doing open houses, no matter if you're doing any type of lead generation, nothing is instant. However, when it comes to farming, there are ways you can speed up the process. So the whole 6 to 18 months is something that has been passed on because of the strategies that used to be taught, which is the postcards. And that's typically what people think of when they think of farming, is it's postcards. So the reality is, if I send out postcards month after month after month after month, yes, it takes a lot longer to start seeing results in your farm, and it can be very expensive. So people tend to tap out and they don't stick with it, or they don't add in other strategies. So it can definitely take longer if you're not doing the right approaches. If you're doing the right things, you can add in things to get instant business, to really start seeing those results. But again, you have to keep in mind that it's not going to be instant. Just because I send out a newsletter or a Facebook post or a online ad, you aren't going to see the results tomorrow. Now you might, and that's awesome. You may start getting some business instantly. That's great. I call that golden nugget business. That's awesome. But it does take time to start building your brand and getting your name out there and see the results. But it doesn't have to take 18 months. And if you have the mindset of it's going to take me 18 months, you may not start it in the first place. And again, a lot of agents don't start because they hear that and they've heard that misinformation that it takes way too long to farm and I'm not going to get the results. So they tend to just bow out and not start at all. So keep that in mind when you are thinking about farming, or really any strategy. Really dissect, is this true? Is it really going to take as long as they say? Or the flip side, is it going to be as quick as I think it's going to be? Maybe we want to meet somewhere in the middle and find out, how long is this actually going to take? What are the results? What are people who have done this at a high level gotten? What are the results that people have done this at a low level gotten? And where's kind of the in-between of where I might be able to end up? So myth number two is farming costs way too much to get results, and I don't have a big budget. That is something I hear all the time when I talk to agents about farming. They say, I don't have a big budget. I can't do farming because of the misinformation, the lack of training, and those out-of-date practices. Because people have been kind of brainwashed into thinking that farming is just postcards, people realize it costs a lot of money if you do that way. So they go, I'm not even going to start it. I don't want to try it. The great thing is farming can be done for next to nothing. Literally, you can put boots on, go out and door knock and meet people. That can be one strategy when it comes to farming. The reality is, though, it will cost you time and energy. So if you don't have the money, you have to focus on the time and the energy. And I teach the thing when it comes to budgeting, there's money budget, your time budget, and then the energy budget. So the money budget's easy to understand because we know here's how much money I have to spend, and hopefully I'm going to get this type of return. So on the time budget, it's a little easier to understand. People still sometimes don't realize how much time it may take on the positive or the negative side of things, and they don't really budget their time. But the important one is also energy. I talk about the energy budget as, if you're going to do something that you don't like, you're going to hate doing it, and it's going to zap your energy. So for me, I always use the example of cold calling and door knocking. I do not like cold calling. It is not something I enjoy. It really zaps my energy. Will I do it? Have I done it? Yes, but it definitely zaps my energy. Door knocking is a lot easier for me. I will happily go out there and door knock, meet people face to face, have conversations, connect with people. So that doesn't zap my energy budget. Open houses, I don't like doing, but some people love open houses and they thrive on open houses, and it actually feeds them energy. So you have to figure out, when you're doing different strategies, how it's going to look, and figure out your energy budget as well. So yes, it may not cost you a lot of money, but it will take time and or energy as well. So when you go through this, you have to realize, if you want to scale, if you want to grow this, it's going to start costing you money, but it doesn't have to cost you much money up front at all. Or you can never spend a dime on farming and just be out and about. You just need to realize that it's the time it's going to take time, to do that. So when you go through this, remember that, get started, figure out what that budget is, how much time and energy and money do I want to spend, and then you can work backwards from there. As you grow, typically we see the results where agents have more time, less money, and then as they start doing deals, they feed money into their budget, they spend a little bit less time, and then they shift like this. Now, what you don't want to do, I talk about this all the time, is you don't want to go where it's all money and no time, because you need to put some time in there to start seeing the best results. It's finding that balance for you of how much time and energy and money do you put in there to make sure that it's going to work. But yeah, if you're new or if you don't have a big budget, you can absolutely get into farming with little to no cost and start seeing successes for sure. So myth number 3 is I need to have sales in the area. And no one's going to know who I am, and I can't farm until I sell a few homes. The reality is no one needs to know who you are to even start positioning yourself as the expert. So with that right approach, you can with the right approach, the right positioning, and the right attitude, you can become the expert in the area before you've even sold your first home. I talk about this all the time. When I started my first farm, my first successful farm, I branded myself as the neighborhood expert. So my team was the Orchard real estate team. So rather than branding it around myself and my face and my name, I branded it as the neighborhood. We branded ourselves as the real estate experts in that area. I had never sold a home in that neighborhood before, didn't live in the neighborhood. I had moved to the area. I was newer to the area, and I positioned myself as the expert. And what I did was I became the expert. I learned all the builders. I learned the parks. I learned the schools. I learned the streets. I learned everything I needed to know about that community to position me as that expert. And when you do that correctly, and you come in with the right attitude, you come in with a positive attitude, with a confident attitude, and you know your inventory, you know your market, you know you've positioned yourself as that expert, it becomes a lot easier to sell yourself, and it becomes a lot easier to become that go-to person. Now, obviously, as you go on, it takes more time and you actually start getting sales, it becomes even that much easier to start seeing those results and to start seeing business start coming in regularly. But you do not need to have you don't even have to have a sold sign. You don't even have to have sold a house in your business at all to start positioning yourself as that expert. So a lot of agents feel like they need to sell a lot of homes before they can do that. And I've talked to a number of agents who've said, well, I want to start selling a few homes, then I'll do that. Then I can start becoming the expert. Then I can use that listing to position myself as the expert. And the reality is you don't need to do that. Again, with the right approach, you can absolutely help differentiate yourself, because most agents aren't doing this. They aren't doing it correctly. Most agents aren't farming. They aren't focusing on a neighborhood. They are losing opportunities. And again, I teach this to lots and lots of agents. Not very many agents farm, and not very many agents farm very well. So there's a lot of opportunity for you to do that and position yourself. Now, if you have sold homes in that neighborhood and you do have a track record, even better. It does make it a lot easier, but it doesn't mean you need to have had that. So if you have been around for a while, you've got some sales, you've got some experience, absolutely great opportunity for you to now leverage that and add that into your repertoire and really help build that credibility as well. But if you're new to farming or new to the business, I don't want you to think that you have to wait until you get sales to start the process. You can literally start tomorrow, get this going, and become that go-to expert person, and I've never sold a home. So farming myth number 4 is turnover rates is the most important thing I should look at when picking my farm. I probably should make this my number 1, because this is the one thing I hear all the time. And agents talk about this all the time. Again, going back to that misinformation, lack of experience, lack of training. Agents have been taught that I should look for an area that has a good turnover rate. The reality is that is an important number, but it's not the only important number. There's a lot of factors to consider. That's just one important factor, but there's more important factors or just as equally important factors. And I go back to the health example all the time. If I check my blood pressure and I've got great blood pressure, but my cholesterol's through the roof, my weight's bad, my cardio's in bad shape, my sleep's terrible, you can say, well, the blood pressure's great, so you're healthy. The turnover rate is one metric. It's one way of measuring an area's overall health performance, but it's not the be all and end all. And so many agents get focused on this because they've heard this, that this is the number one way to do it. And again, I talk to agents all the time about it, and they say, well, I gotta find something that's got a good turnover rate. And the reality is that's one thing that should matter. There are so many other things that you should be looking at as a whole and not just individually to make a decision on whether it's a good area. I have agents who focus on strictly turnover rate because that's what they want to focus on. That's great. I have agents who look at other things like them living in the neighborhood. For them, that's important. For some people, price point's important. For some people, the overall value of that farm, of how much business is happening in that area. Competition is a big part. Trends to see what's happening. Is the farm going up in price? Or is the farm going up in sales? Is it going down? Is it becoming a more desirable area? I use the example of my friend Rob all the time. When I coached him, he got started and I was helping him choose a farm. He picked an area that had a very low turnover rate. Their neighborhood had probably the majority of people in there were 60, 70 years old. They'd been in the home for 30, 40 years. They've probably still have the green shag carpet and the 1-inch hardwood floors, these really older homes, and the demographic living in there was a much older demographic. But what's happened was people were starting to come in and do infill development, and they were tearing down these homes and they were starting to build new homes. So we saw opportunity in there that the turnover rate was not very high at that time, but we knew where that trend was going. So he was willing to do that because the price point was kind of mid-level price point, but was transitioning into a much higher level price point. And it allowed him to really build a solid business in there as it grew. And as those new homes were developed in there, he positioned himself as that expert. He didn't worry about the turnover rate because that wasn't an important metric for him. We looked at the long-term trends and what was important. And now he does consistently 6 figures out of his farm year after year after year after year because he was focusing on the right things that mattered to him and really focused on the overall metrics. So if you've tried farming before, if you've heard about farming before, and you've been preached the lie that turnover rate's the most important metric, I want you to get rid of that because it is not true. It is a metric and it is an important metric, but it's not the important metric or the only important metric. So there's a number of things you want to look at when you're choosing your farm. The downside is some people now get hung up on it. When it's just the turnover rate, it's easier for some people to make a decision and they say, okay, I'll just find something that has a good turnover rate. Myself, I was a victim of that. My very first farm that I ever tried, I looked at the area, looked at the price point and the turnover rate. And I said, I'm going to go for it. It's got good turnover rate and a good price point. I was misinformed. I got the wrong information. I was not well educated when it came to farming. And the reality is the area that I was working in was very heavily, there's a lot of new immigrants there. So the English language is not most people's first language. So when I was out there and I was door knocking, because that's what I like to do, there was a really strong language barrier, and it was very difficult for me to break into and connect with people because I couldn't speak most people's first languages. So there was a bit of a discrepancy when it came to languages. So I didn't know that. I just looked at the numbers. I looked at the turnover rate. And then there was also a very successful agent farming the area. I didn't look at the competition. And there was another agent who was just crushing it, who was already farming it as well. So my very first shot at farming, I didn't look at the overall numbers and didn't make the right decision. And then my successful farm, I found the right fit with the right numbers that really mattered and that really helped catapult my business to the next level and helped me really figure out what farming was about. So farming myth number 5 is I should promote the heck out of myself. Farming is all about showing off my pretty face. Now, I'm going to disappoint some people here, but farming is not about your face. Farming is not about even you, really. A lot of agents take the approach that it's about them. The reality is the community wants to know that you care about them. The best way to grow your business, the best way to connect, the best way to really catapult yourself as that community ambassador is to provide value to the farm and let them know that you care about them. If you help the community, they will help you in return. And this is the mistake. And this is a big shift from the way farming was to the way farming is and that future of farming. The reality is that days of self-promotion are slowly dwindling. I wouldn't even say slowly. They're quickly dwindling. A lot of agents are out there and they're promoting themselves and they're promoting their face and they're talking about how great they are and how many homes they sell. And the reality is that strategy worked in the past and it still works today, but it doesn't work as effectively. And each year, year over year over year, That effectiveness is disappearing, and agents who may have crushed it 10 years ago or 20 years ago with their geographic farming style of self-promotion is starting to see, not even starting, they've been seeing that the effects really drying up. And again, I've talked to a lot of agents. I've had big agents who've come to me who sell hundreds of deals a year and say, hey, what's going on? Because what used to work for me is not working. And the reality is the self-promotion push marketing is not as effective as engaging with the community and providing value to the community. And if you do it correctly, you will start to see people re-engage with you. They'll start to see you as that ambassador, and they'll start to see that you care, and they'll want to do business with you because you care about the community, not because you promoted your face to 1,000 people over and over and over again. So the mistake a lot of agents make is they look at their farm as a marketing target, and they speak at their audience. I talk about this all the time, the difference between speaking at and speaking with. Speaking at your audience is I'm pushing my message out there and just keep pushing my message out there, and there's no real dialogue. And I use the example all the time of if I was at a party and I was talking to someone and all they just kept doing was talking about themselves and talking about themselves and talking about themselves and talking about themselves, I would tune out. I would never want to talk to that person. I would avoid them next time I saw them. I would not want to be part of their social circles because all they do is talk about themselves. And the reality is this is what agents have done in the past, and they talked about themselves. They talked about how great they are. They've talked about how many homes they've sold. They've talked about the awards they've gotten, and they just keep pushing their message of what they think people want to hear about them out to their audience. The right approach, in my opinion, is engaging with them. If I was at a party and I was having a conversation, healthy conversations are equal. They're balanced of people are talking and sharing and engaging, and people misuse the opportunity in their farm to create, they don't take the opportunity in their farm to create these conversations. So when it comes to farming, it's really about engaging with your community, providing value to them, and having conversations go both ways. How can you connect with people, have them reach out to you? How can you talk with them, not at them? So when it comes to your marketing, you need to look at it from that lens of how can I communicate with these people and not at them? Again, the same mistakes are made, I find, in social media where people push their message out and don't have that dialogue back and forth. So you want to really create value for your farm. And if you do that correctly, you'll start seeing results. This is one way to really speed up that process that we talked about earlier of not taking 6 to 18 months, because it takes 6 to 18 months if all you're doing is just pushing your message out there. If you engage, you connect, and you position yourself as that expert, and you become the ambassador, people will start to do business with you a lot quicker than just you verbally having diarrhea at them about how great you are or all the business you do. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about farming and really wrapping your head around that. Myth number 6 is I need to have a lot of market share to be the go-to agent. Again, this is another common myth that a lot of agents think. Going back to that, I need to sell homes. They also think, well, I need to have a lot of home sales to be the go-to agent. And the reality is we think as agents that we need 30%, 40% market share before I'm the go-to person. The reality is you don't need as much as you think. When you hit that 5 to 10% market share, so if there's 100 home sales and you're getting 5 to 10 of those in the area, people start positioning you as that expert. And it's almost magical. Like that 10% mark is kind of that tipping point of when people really start seeing you as that go-to person. If you have 5%, people are starting to see who you are. They understand that you're working on the area, because if you look in most areas, and it happens in almost every single neighborhood, there's going to be one dominant player in the area. Usually it's not because they're farming. Generally speaking, it's the larger teams who just do a fair amount of deals. So they just do business as a whole. So they may do 300 or 400 deals for their whole team. So by default, they're going to be doing 10 or 15 deals in that neighborhood just because. But then you look at it, then it usually drops down to 4 or 5 deals a year. Then it's a couple people do 3 or 4 deals a year. A couple people do 2 deals a year. And then a few people do, and then the rest of the people do 1. The reality is to get mind share, thanks David Greenspan, to get mind share, you have to get, so you don't need to get a whole lot of business to start gaining that mind share and to start gaining that, start to position you as that person who's got the actual market share. Now, if you've got 20 or 30% market share, you're doing great. I always explain to agents that we see the business differently than the public sees us. The public tends to drown out a lot of marketing messages. we do that as well with other industries as well. But we're much more aware of who the go-to players are in our business. We're aware of who's doing how much deals because we're in it and we're thinking about it all the time. The general public does not think that way. Most people, I've heard that only 1% of the population is thinking about real estate at any given time. So the agents who are doing 1 or 2 deals a year are not being embedded into people's minds, that they're not being picked up by those people who are living in that area. They see one sign, saw it 6 months ago, they never remember it again. So what happens is after you start doing 3 deals or 4 deals, people start seeing it a little bit more. And if you're doing the right marketing, you're doing farming correctly, you're getting in front of people in different ways, and you're connecting with people, it doesn't take a whole lot to actually get that market share because there's not a lot of agents doing a lot of volume in those areas. So I use the example one. There's a team in our area. They started their business in this smaller part of town, or a smaller town, and they really crushed it. And everyone knows them as the go-to people in that area. And I ask agents, you say, who do you think of when you think of this town? And they say this team, and they, without fail, everyone knows that they do a fair amount of business in that area. Then my next question is, how much market share do you think they have? So it's easy for people to answer that they've got X amount of business, or so they're the go-to people. Then I ask, how much business do you think they have? And generally I get agents saying 20%, 25%, 30% market share. When I checked, last time I checked, they had 13% market share. So they didn't even have 20% market share, and yet they're still considered the go-to people in that neighborhood, or in that town. So it doesn't take a whole lot of market share to be seen as that go-to person. So if you focus on it and you start getting some deals and you start working it correctly and you really create that engagement, you create that community ambassador, and you start layering in the right strategies, you can quickly get to 5 to 10% without having to break your bank account, without having to work nights and weekends and overtime and all this stuff, and start becoming that go-to person. Now, if you start getting over 10%, you're then seen as that go-to person. So I always tell agents, when you're getting started, aim for that 5% to get started, get yourself to that 10%, and then really start building onto it. And if you do it correctly, to get from 10% to 20% becomes that much easier. So I don't want you to focus on thinking that, well, I have to have a lot of market share to be a go-to person, because you don't. So hopefully that answers that question, and hopefully you keep that in mind when you go forward. Lastly is farming myth number 7, which is I can't compete. There's a dominant agent in my area. So just like we talked about last time, most agents are not having that big of a market share that you can't compete. So I always say, unless the agent has 25% or more market share, there's no reason you can't go up to that area. If an agent has 10% market share, and that may seem like a lot, there's still 9 out of 10 deals that you could go out and get. You don't need 100% deals to become the go-to agent. You don't need 100% to have an incredible business. The reality is you need to look for areas that have that has good turnover rates, that has the good numbers, that has a lot, and some competition is actually good for you. You also have to make sure that that agent isn't the dominant player just because of the volume they do. I've seen this many, many times where agents think, well, I can't go in there because so-and-so is already in there. And if you look, they have the same market share in every neighborhood because of the volume of business. They're not actively farming the area. They're not actively trying to capture as much market share in that neighborhood specific. They're not becoming the go-to people in that neighborhood. So you don't have to become the absolute go-to, or you don't have to worry about other agents who are just doing a lot of business. Now, if there are agents who are focusing on it and they're starting to grow, you may want to be a little more cautious and say, okay, this person really is crushing it. They're really doing a lot. They're becoming that go-to person. It may not be the right fit for you. What I'd be more concerned about is multiple agents with a joint market share. What I mean by that is sometimes there's 3 or 4 agents who do 10% each or 20% each. Now, if you've got a lot of people taking up a few agents taking up a lot of those deals, then it might be a little bit tougher to get in there if there's 3 or 4 big time agents all focusing on that area. If there's one agent in there, I wouldn't be as worried. But if there are a number of agents taking up that kind of most of the market share from a few agents, then it may not be as easy to break into because they're spending money, they're marketing to the area, and they're dominating it. But if there's only one agent, and in most cases, and I'm telling you, and each market's going to be completely different, or each neighborhood's going to be completely different, but in most cases, there isn't a dominant person farming the neighborhood. I've researched lots of neighborhoods and gone through a lot of areas with agents when I'm coaching them. There aren't usually people really farming it. So I don't want you to get hung up on worrying about too much about the competition, but you still need to keep it in mind. The other thing is, when it comes to competition, is what is that agent's trends? Right? There's an agent in our area who focused on this little pocket. She was the go-to person. I think she had 15, 17, or 13%, something like that. And year after year, her market share disappeared and it started going down. It was 13, 11, 9, 7. Last time I checked, she had 3 or 4% market share. The reality is she stopped doing new marketing strategies. The area has a lot of new development coming in, and you get a lot of people from out of town moving in, and new builders building in the area. And she didn't have the connections that she used to have, so her business kept going down. So there may be an agent who had market share or who had a dominant market share that in the past you may not have gone after, but it started going down. And again, on the flip side, you may have it where it goes the other way, where they're starting to really focus and they're going up. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about farming. I mean, you're going through and saying, is this the right fit? Now, I also threw in a bonus myth for you. So I know I said 7, but I actually threw in a bonus myth for you. Myth happens all the time that I need to figure out farming on my own. And the reality is that there's nothing wrong with you trying to figure out farming on your own. And you can do that. You can go out and you can try to learn farming on your own, but it can be costly. It can be excruciating. It can be tough to figure out, and you may not get the best results as quick as possible. But if you have the right help, the right systems, tools, and experience, you can definitely speed up that process. And again, this comes back to why I started what I'm doing. I wanted to help create an opportunity for agents to really learn what farming is about, get the right resources and tools, and help them speed up that process. Because like myself, I failed 2 times. I tried doing farms and I failed miserably because I didn't have the right mindset and the right approach, and it really made a difference when I started learning it. So you may be asking, what's next? If I want some more help, what I want to do, there's a few things. So the first is, if you want, you can download a free report that I put together. So you can download that right now. It's 5 strategies to grow your geographic farm. It's no cost, no obligation. You can sign up today. It's at launchyourfarm.com/rookies. Lawrence is going to put the links to this in the chats as well after, so you guys can go back if you miss it. But you can go grab that right now. It's launchyourfarm.com/rookies. It's a free guide. Just give you some different ideas that you can implement into your farm. Next thing is, you can check out my site. So it's launchyourfarm.com. There's my interview show on there. So if you want, there's some great resources. I interview agents about their geographic farm. I'm at 28 interviews now. I interview real estate professionals and real estate agents who are crushing it in farming. There's a ton of insider information and good strategies and a real variety on how people are doing farms. And that's really what I wanted to do with the show, was to showcase to agents there's a bunch of different ways you can do farming. It's not just one way of doing it. So you can go through that. There's hundreds of hours, or not hundreds of hours, there's a lot of hours of video on there, so you can go back and check it out. There's some information as well. So check that out if you want. You can get information there. You can find me on social media. So on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, it's at Launch Your Farm. Again, the website, you can shoot me an email at launchyourfarm@gmail.com. But I've also put together some courses and some training, and I've got some discounts for you through Lawrence. So Lawrence has helped with this as well. So we're going to put the links to these as well in the chat, so you can get these as well. So I've got 3 things that I think are really going to help you depending on where you're at in your business. So Lawrence wanted me to explain this to you so you guys can understand what it's about and see if it's a good fit for you. So the first is my Launch Your Farm Bootcamp. Lawrence is actually taking this right now. He's going through it with me. And what it is, it's meant for agents who already have a farm, or really just getting their farm launched, or have an existing farm. And it's 8 weeks of live Zoom calls. We have a closed Facebook group. It's a smaller group of agents that go through this. And it's actually 15 different strategies that we go through. And at the end of it, it's kind of a menu of strategies that you can implement into your farm. So we talk about unique ideas, how to really grow your business, and you start layering in those strategies. The reality is, you're not going to do all of them, because most agents aren't going to take the time and the energy to do that. But by the time you finish this, you'll have a number of different strategies you can look back and implement into your business. They're all pre-recorded as well, recorded, so you can go back, watch them again. We have homework each week, so you can go through and make sure you're staying on track and add these strategies in. We have Q&A, so you get to talk to me and ask questions, things like that. So it's a great program if you really want to take it to the next level. These strategies are COVID friendly. I designed this in the middle of COVID, so it's not I'm not teaching you door knocking. There's no postcards. It's not about just listed, just sold. It's nothing like that. You can check out that. We'll put the link in the chat so you can see what those are about and get the links to that. We have a discount code, so it's 20% off for that. The next one starts on March 11th, and the code is rookies20. So we'll put that in there as well. I also have the farm course, which is great for agents if you're thinking about getting started in farming. It's kind of covers the fundamentals of what farm is about. It's just almost 3 hours of video. You can go through it at your own pace, and we break down what farming is, why you should do it, how do you take those numbers and metrics, some of the things we talked about, how to really measure what a good farm is. It's a good way to get you started as well. Again, there's 20% off on that. And then the other program I created is the 30 days to launch. And this is designed for agents who want to get their farm launched and want to get into action quickly. I laid it out. It's 30 days of videos. Each day a new video gets released, and it layers. So it starts, the first week is how to go through the metrics, how to find the right farm. Next week is talking about marketing, how to get your marketing, then you go into how to create value, and then we tie it all together. So at the end of the 30 days, you've got your basis of your farm ready to go. It's task oriented, and it gets you into action. It's intended for you to really get out there and start the farm. It's not meant for just going, oh, I'm hoping, I'd like to. It's literally each day the new video gets released and you have homework to do. So by the end of the 30 days, you should have no excuse. You've got your farm ready to go. And again, the code for that is rookies20. So depending on where you're at in your business, if you're thinking about farming, if you're new, the course and the 30 days to launch is a good fit. If you've already done farming or you're doing farming now, the boot camp is definitely a good fit as well. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. I'm happy to answer any of those questions. The other thing is we have the free draw. So we've talked about that in the sign up form. If you registered to do that, if you haven't done so, go back and register. It's lawrencemack.com/launchyourfarm. So we're doing a draw on February 5th, on February 25th. We are going to be doing a draw, and I'm going to be giving away $900 worth of stuff. So even if you don't sign up for anything, if you don't do anything, go do this, sign up for this, because I think it's a ton of value in there. So the first prize is my boot camp. That's a $500 course. So the first prize, someone's going to get, a lucky winner's going to get a entry to the boot camp. Second prize is my 30-day launch, which is $200 program as well. Third prize is going to be a 1-hour consulting phone call. So if someone's thinking about wanting to really take it and see if it's the right fit, it's $150. And then 2 $25 Starbucks gift cards. So take some time, go register. It's lawrencemack.com/launchyourfarm. And that's the draw prizes. We're going to do that on the 25th. We're going to do that in the morning. So the latest you can register is the 24th. So make sure you get that done by midnight to make sure you're eligible for that prize as well. And then I just want to share my final thoughts, and then we'll get into answering questions as well. So in my opinion, there's 3 things you must do to succeed in farming. And without these, you are not going to succeed. The first is you need to learn. And whatever that looks like for you, whether you're learning through my programs, whether you're going out there and learning on your own, whether you're shadowing someone, or you're just learning by going out and doing it, you need to learn what you need to do in farming. You can try it, but if you don't have the right approach, it's going to be very painful. It may not take as much time, or it may take longer than it can, or it may be more expensive, but you need to learn something. If you're doing what you did 20 years ago, you're probably not succeeding even close to the level that you should. If you're just getting started and you don't know what to do, focus on what can I learn about farming and how can I put that into my business. The next is you need to commit. Without committing to a farm, you are destined to fail. Again, I've talked to hundreds of agents. The number one reason why agents quit is they're not committed. They don't commit to their budget. They don't commit to a schedule. They don't commit to a plan, and they don't really commit and stick to what is important to getting it launched. And they figure they'll try farming. And the worst thing you can do is try farming. You don't just dabble in it. You have to have a plan. You have to learn what works, and you got to commit to it. And lastly, you need to start. So if you don't start, you will be planning and you'll be planning and you'll be learning and you'll be committing to start, but you don't actually get out there and do it. So you need to go out there and actually start. Without starting, it's just like if I don't plant a seed today, it won't grow. The longer I wait to plant that seed, the longer it's going to take for me to reap that harvest. So every day that you wait and delay, the longer it's going to take to start seeing those benefits. And the worst thing that can happen is you don't do it, and then someone now comes in and farms the area that you wanted to farm, and now they're the go-to person. You missed opportunities. So you need to take action and start. So I'd love to see you write out one step that you're going to take in the next 48 hours and tell someone about it. Doesn't have to be me. It could be people in Rookies. It could be Lawrence. It could be your boss. It could be your spouse. It could be your kid. Do something and write out a step and say what you're going to do whether it's farming or not, just take that action. If you want, email it to me. I'll happily hold you accountable and check in on you. You can email it to me at launchyourfarm@gmail.com. But I'd love to see you take action, because we know if you don't do something in the next 48 hours, you aren't probably going to take action. So do that now and take some action. So after that, we are going to answer some questions. So if you have any questions, I know we're going to go through some of the chat. Lawrence is going to jump in and we're going to ask some questions and hopefully answer some you have some great questions, and then we'll go from there.
All right. Well, thanks, Ryan. That was pretty amazing. 7 myths. I basically posted them on the Facebook and put a bunch of different links on there. So that's good. A couple questions coming up. First one is, do you have a book?
I am actually in the process of working on it.
Okay.
So I'm working on one. I've funny you mentioned that. I've bought some competitions books and I'm working through, and I'm actually working on my own book right now. So not yet, but I am working on that.
Okay, sounds great. Another question really is about incumbents. And so when you're in a tough farm, again, not just maybe one dominant, even if it's one dominant agent with a large market share, or maybe multiple ones with, significant market share, what do you suggest? Like at that point, maybe find a different farm, or, what's your general, it depends on the farm.
That's a great question. So it depends on your farm. Depends on how committed you are. Have you already been farming it? If you've already been farming it and people are starting to come in, then you don't just give up a farm because there's other people that you're up against. If you're starting a brand new farm, I may look at other areas. And then again, if you go through the right metrics and you're making a decision, that may be a deciding factor for you to say, okay, this isn't the right fit. One of the biggest mistakes that I see a lot of agents make is they become emotionally attached to the farm that they're working on. And the number one reason for that is I live in the area. So they want to choose a farm based on that they live in it. And that's fine. And that can be one of your deciding factors and one of your metrics that you're using. But if you're emotionally attached to it and it's not a good farm, doesn't have a good turnover rate, doesn't have a good price point, commissions are low, competition's high, and the only reason you're choosing is because you're living in it, if that's your choice, by all means, just know that you're up against all those things. A lot of agents also choose to have an area because they live in it, because they think that that's going to get them more business. Because if I live in it, people know me, and then people will only want to do business if I live in it. And the reality is that is the furthest thing from the truth. I've proven that when I started my farm. Again, never sold in it, never lived in it. So people don't care, or some people might, but the majority of people will not care if you come up with the right plan and position yourself as the expert, whether you live in it. So if you're choosing the area and it's heavily got a lot of competition, if the other numbers don't make sense, then I would obviously want to re-look at it. Again, if you've already been farming and you've got you've been doing it, you've been successfully doing it, and now you're up against competition, then you may want to look at your strategies and say, okay, how can I take them out at the knees and really take market share again?
Someone also asked about the metrics for the area, and besides turnover rate, is there anything else, or basically we're looking at turnover rate? Yeah,
turnover rate, competition, days on market. A metric that I've coined or created myself is the total farm value. So that's the total value of what that farm is worth. So the number of number of transactions times the average commission times 2, because you have the buy and the sell side. So basically, if you look at it, if I got every single piece of business in that neighborhood, how much commission could I extract from that farm? What that total number can make a difference, because you could have 2 areas that have identical total farm value, but one has higher price points or higher commissions or higher turnover rate. So it really depends on how you're looking at it. But then I use that number to say, okay, if there's $1 million worth of total business and I want to get 10% market share, that's $100,000 worth of business for me. Then I'd work backwards from that. So that's a number. Demographics is important for a lot of people. Again, for me, the language was very tricky for me to break through. It wasn't culturally and language wise, it was very difficult. Other numbers would be those trends. Are there new homes being built? Are there less homes being built? Are they changing the style of homes? Perfect example would be condo market in Toronto right now, with trending outward. If you look at it as a blip in the radar, if you were looking at that, you'd see this mass exodus. And if you're just looking at the numbers of what's happening right now, you may decide to get out of it. But this could also be an opportunity for someone, because now other people are giving up on doing marketing to the downtown core, and this could be an opportunity. So there's a ton of different things. I cover a lot of those in some of the programs. So it really depends on what you want to do with it. And again, there's no real right or wrong answer. You have to look at the whole and figure out what is it I want to get out of my farm.
Yeah. So, I mean, some people like living in their farm,
Yep.
but then so they see neighbors and that kind of stuff, and maybe your school zone's there, so it's great. But other people like the privacy. They don't like the fact that you're walking around and continuously seeing other prospects or clients with that kind of stuff. So,
Exactly.
I'm going to for that. So, what would you say about the farm in terms of, I guess, again, with when you don't have that cultural fit, right? Whether it's color of your skin, maybe your religion, maybe the language, whatever it is. Do you think that it's probably better at a high level to maybe think about a different farm?
I mean, that's always a tricky one to answer because it depends on how much. And again, I've seen a lot of agents say, well, I can't do that because they think there's not as many people that speak English there, unless you've actually gone out and checked. In Canada, we've got the Geo Warehouse, and you can kind of see the languages, the education, the age levels, the origin, where people are coming from. I wouldn't use it as my only metric to decide if it's an area, but if you have an area that makes sense and you can break into, then might as well do it. If it's tricky when you get into religion and ethnicity. But
Yeah.
a good example would be, and you and I talked about this, in Markham, there's a lot of Chinese.
Sure, we'll use Markham.
Yeah, there's a lot of Chinese agents that are there, and it's a heavily Chinese community. I wouldn't choose to unless I lived in Markham. I wouldn't go after somewhere in Markham because it's just not the right cultural fit, language fit. I don't do marketing overseas, so you'd have to change. Now, there are people who crush it who are not the same as the people living in that neighborhood. The other thing is trends and demographics change, things shift all the time as well. So one area could be hot now, and then tomorrow could be a crappy neighborhood. We have an area here that I've always said was an underserviced. It was a low price point. It was the style of homes, they're like the wartime homes, and people like kind of skipped over them. And always said that's going to be the next big area. And people said, oh, it's a crappy area. It's a bunch of old people. No one wants to live there, similar to my friend Rob's area. And then as the prices in Burlington skyrocketed, that all of a sudden became the hot place to go because people couldn't afford the other areas. So then that became, for the young demographics and the young buyers, that became the go-to place. So that's another one too, is like, who do you want to work with as far as sociographics and demographics? For some people, they want to work with senior citizens. I have a friend, and one of my first coaching clients, she went after the seniors market. She loves that market. She goes after the seniors market. And for her, that was a huge passion for her, and she focused on it. I sell to senior citizens. I'm not going to say no to senior citizen, but I'm not going to put my time and energy into that. I know other agents who love to do first-time buyers, and they like that young family or investors. So it really depends on who your ideal client is that you want to work with, and figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, there's different farms, whether it's high turnover, lower price point, or the high, low turnover, high price points. Yep. None of us are leaving because they're gonna be living there for 50, 40 years, kind of thing.
Actually, I want to add to that too, because that's a good point. So when I started my farm, there was two neighborhoods in Burlington. If anyone knows Burlington, there's Orchard and Millcroft. If you look at Orchard, there's 3,600 homes in the Orchard, and in Millcroft, there's I think 2,700 homes at the time. The price point in Millcroft was about 35% higher than the price point in the Orchard. So if you look at that, there's less homes, but higher price point. More homes, lower price point. But the reality is, so if you look at the total farm value, which I was talking about, they actually were worth the exact same amount. So the same amount within $10,000, $20,000 of how much commission would come out of those areas. But now if you take it the next level down, most agents were going after Millcroft because it has a high turnover rate, relatively speaking, but because of the price point, everyone wanted to go after that area, and they were focused on Millcroft. There was no one doing the Orchard because everyone was focused on Millcroft, because Millcroft was the sexy place to be and everyone wants to go after that area. So you had 10 agents all fighting for like a good chunk of the business, and you go to the Orchard and there was one. So price point can make a difference, but it's adding in the competition, the commission, days on market, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's a lot to consider. For
sure. I mean, I'm here in Lorne Park and Mississauga, and you have a few major incumbents, but you have high price points. That's where I got my first listing by farming.
Yep.
Here. So, I mean, there's pros and cons for sure.
Yeah. And if you want to do luxury, great. It's just a different market, and you have to understand it's a different market from price points and time, budget, what you need to do with your marketing, how the days on market and things like that. But then there's also less opportunities because
Right.
there's less homes that are selling and the turnover rates aren't as high. So it
Yeah,
really depends.
turnover rates a lot lower. They're
Yeah.
all, old bungalows with people who want to live there till they die, and then
Exactly.
the kids take over,
Exactly.
and then they just sell it as an estate sale or something.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
happens a lot. So as a pillar of business, farming, what is your general feeling about that versus, say, cold calling, online leads, as a pillar of business, in general, is this basically your go-to, is highly recommended for everybody?
Yes. And here's why, because it's actually not a pillar. It's the foundation. It's the house to me.
Mhm.
Because the great thing with farming is you can add in all of those pillars with that strategy hacking. You can add in door knocking, you can add in cold calling, you can add in online leads, you can add in open houses, you can add in community events under the farming umbrella. And that's why I love it so much, because you can add in all of those strategies, you can take out pieces, you can add in pieces, and you can have that, which I talked about at the beginning, is it's very much more efficient because you can now layer it together to get the most out of it. If you just do cold calling, and there's agents who do that, that's their whole thing, is just cold calling. You now have to go to a much broader audience. Your effect doesn't have the same because people don't know who you are, and you got to keep calling neighborhood, and then you circle back and keep doing it. And then something like COVID hits, and now you can't do door knocking if that was all you did. So when you have a farm, not the sky's the limit, but the number of strategies you can implement are much higher, and they have that compound effect because they work together. If you do it, if you work
It's like a combo, all of the different facets point together
Exactly.
for the foundation of farming.
So you can do
great.
a little bit of door knocking, a little bit of open houses, a little bit, but you get much more out of it than just one main pillar of business.
Great. Well, so if there's no other questions here, I just want Ryan to go through again, I guess, the few courses and maybe the draw.
Sure. Yeah, we'll go through that one sec again. So yeah, the report is there if you guys want to get that. It's launchyourfarm.com/rookies. That's the 5 strategies to grow your geographic farm. It's a free guide.
One more question that I just thought of. So if you are trying to choose a farm, which of your courses is the best for that?
Trying to choose it, the 30-day launch would be the best fit for that. So it's great. Again, the website's launchyourfarm.com. You can see the interviews, the blogs. You can access the courses on there as well. And then, the boot camp starts March 11th. Limited seating. So it's a smaller group that's meant for people who are farming or would like to take their farming to the next level. Great program. It's 8 weeks. Ton of value in there. It's $4.99 with 20% off. And then the course is meant for people who are just thinking about farming, want to get more information about farming. It's really the fundamentals of what farming is about. And you kind of do it at your own pace. That's $99 plus 20% off. And then the 30-day launch, that's gets you into action. It gets you choosing. You literally go through step by step, and it forces you to actually do the work, which is one of the things that agents wanted. They wanted accountability. So I created a program to do that, to make sure that they're actually taking those steps. And so it's a great program. It's 30 days. So if you start today, in 30 days, you can have your farm up and running and ready to go. And then the prize, which again, there's $900 in prizes. So make sure you sign up for that. We're doing the draw on the 25th. 24th is the last day for the registration. First prize is the boot camp, $500. So that's a huge thing. So I always say, give it a shot. Second prize is that 30-day launch program. It's $200. Third prize is the consulting, and then 2 Starbucks gift cards. So
that is awesome. Realtors need coffee. So that's all good. I think there's no other questions for now. So thank you very much for joining us today, Ryan.
Oh, thank you. This is awesome. I'm glad to share this with your group.
Yeah. And I guess we'll see you online.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.